Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Ranks Squad. This is Ranks FC back on your screens for a live. It's good to be back. My name is Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today. I'm joined by the rank of Mr. Sam Tai. How you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. Yes, very well, thank you. We've got a packed week of European football to sink our teeth into, and just to add something more to the plate, it's a bit like a Christmas dinner, isn't it? Where you've got plenty on there and you don't need any more, couldn't possibly have any more, and then Southampton go ahead and swing a manager around in the space of about 24 hours, giving us yet another talking point to get into. So we thought, let's go live and let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jesse Marsch looks set to become the new Southampton manager. Hasn't been announced yet as we record this video. It might get announced in the middle of it. You never really know. But generally, it looks like he is going to be the man that takes over the hot seat at Southampton. He takes over from Nathan Jones. And what I thought would be good to start with here, I mean, you're a man who has worked for this club in terms of writing the program notes, etc., etc. You know Southampton very, very well. Where did it all go wrong for Nathan Jones? I think is probably the fair starting point. And then we can work out from there as to how things look for Jesse.
Yeah, well, it's not been a particularly pleasant 3 months with Nathan Jones in charge, to put it very lightly. He's had some good wins in the cup, and they were not far off, genuinely, a Wembley final. Came unstuck against a very, very good Newcastle side over 2 legs. No shame in that. Beat City on the way to that point, and they've progressed pretty nicely in the FA Cup as well. The problem is all the wins, apart from one, were coming in the cup. And in the league, which is your kind of bread and butter here in terms of the relegation stakes, he lost almost every game. So 7 losses in 8. The spare one there is a win at Everton against Frank Lampard's Everton, which kind of just tells you everything you need to know, right? The only team that were genuinely worse than Southampton during this spell were Everton, to absolutely no one's surprise. And it's been very tough to watch. It's been very tough to listen to as well. Nathan Jones, I think a lot of people are starting to realise, does seem like a bit of a strange person. His post-match comments are very odd. His interviews and his press conferences have been likened to David Brent. He has a habit of standing there and saying a lot of things that nobody else is seeing. And I'm told this is a general repeating pattern from his time at Luton. He will stand there at the end of the game and he will say a load of stuff that everyone goes, what? I didn't see any of that. I don't agree with any of that. And it's kind of like he lives in his own world a little bit. On the pitch, he basically, after 7 Premier League games, said that he had made too many compromises and he had been pandering to Premier League egos far too much, and he didn't see himself in his team, and that starting with the weekend just gone, we would see the real Nathan Jones Southampton. That was his last game in charge. They went 1-0 up and they lost to 10-man Wolves, despite having a goal advantage. They changed formations probably 3-4 times a game, played people in different weird positions. It's all looked a bit jumbled, all looked a bit confused. The fan atmosphere at St Mary's is so toxic. And, on Saturday against Wolves, there was a person in the crowd escorted out of the stadium for trying to hand Nathan Jones a giant P45 prop. For those of you in international audience, that's a form you get given when you are relieved from your duties in this country. So yeah, it's all come to a head. Funnily enough, it's come to a head just 4 days after a fan forum in which the ownership group sat there and reaffirmed their faith in Nathan Jones in front of an invited audience. And
the worst thing you can do for anyone's job security is reaffirm your faith in them, isn't it?
It's the vote of confidence. I mean, I'm not sure what else they were supposed to do there. They couldn't sit there in the fan forum and go, yeah, to be honest, if he loses at the weekend, we're going to sack him. You can't really do that. Yeah. But the timing of it is very weird, very jarring. Look, I said early in January, it's not too late to sack him. He's only had 3 or 4 games at this point, but it's not too late. This isn't going to work out. I don't relish in being proved right there. And it wasn't exactly a bold call. It was clearly not happening. They wasted a World Cup break. They wasted 30 days worth of preparation to get no better at all, to get worse. So here they are again, 3rd manager of the season.
Yeah, they could be on for a record. Fulham had 3. I don't think anyone's ever had more than 3. So it does ring quite horrible bells as far as I was concerned. But you're looking at this, and You're thinking, I will miss Nathan Jones's press conferences. I'm not a Southampton fan, famously. So, I will miss the fact that he is genuinely box office in terms of what he says. But I can see why people took their frustrations out. I am sad, though, in that a manager who did a really, really good job with Luton. Now, he might have a bit of like the howitis about him, or at least previous howitis before he went to Newcastle.
Howitis.
In that every time Eddie Howe left Bournemouth for a bit, it seemed to all go Pete Tong. We've seen something similar every time Nathan Jones has left Luton, but he's not going to be going back to that job because Rob Edwards is doing a really nice job after crossing the divide between Watford and Luton. So it doesn't look like the Luton job's back for him. I'm sad that a manager who proved his worth bringing Luton up the divisions to a high point in the Championship has not been able to make it stick in the Premier League, because I think that's a good path and one that people should be encouraged to follow. So there's some of that in that regard, but I can understand the frustrations of Saints fans. And that's what we're going to get onto, right? What does Jesse bring to this table if he is the new manager? We're going to assume he is for the duration of this video. This is the kind of point that maybe Saints have been missing. And is it that element of just a personality that people can actually get behind?
Yeah, I think when you're drawing up your list of positives for this potential appointment, and that's what I've done, and it is very much a list of pros and cons. This is no perfect appointment, but if you're on your third manager of the season in mid-Feb, then obviously something's gone wrong, and you're not going to be able to take your pick of perfect appointments. But you draw up that list, and the first thing on the list for me with Jesse Marsch is that he is a galvanizing presence. He is a very affable character. He is a very passionate man. He is the sort of person who will put his arm quite literally around your shoulder. He is that kind of presence. And I didn't necessarily get that from Nathan Jones. And that, we're going to draw this comparison a lot, but that's a lot more similar to Ralph Hasenhüttl than it is Nathan Jones. He's not as standoffish. He's not as odd. He's a very personable man. I mean, you and we've interviewed Jesse Marsch, and we think he's lovely. Yeah. He may not have had the greatest of success in his last couple of jobs, but he has had an immediate impact in places that he has gone. And that is in no small part down to the fact that he is very personable and a very impactful, sort of like intoxicating personality in a very good way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, Saints are in a pretty dreadful position. They are bottom of the Premier League. They have 15 points from 22 games, 3 points off Bournemouth and Everton, who are in 19th and 18th respectively, and 4 points off Marsch's old employers, Jesse Leeds United. There you go, Jesse's Leeds. It is really one of those. But I think what was interesting, I was reading quite a lot of the pieces on Leeds forums after he was removed from his duties at Leeds United. And one of my favorite pieces ended with the line, said, "A good man, Jesse Marsch, a nice man, just not the right man." And I think it was quite a poignant thing to read, because everything I've experienced of Jesse and having that conversation with him, he gave us far more time than he needed to. His press officer was trying to drag him away. He's like, no, I'm enjoying this. I'm staying with these guys. And we had a really lovely chat with him, and his views on football are really clear, and he makes them really clear, and he just likes talking about the game. And I think that's an amazing thing. But it comes with kind of caveats, right? As in the galvanizing presence. Yes, absolutely. There's a little bit of a return to the RB school. We're going to go back onto that in a little while, but there are negatives as well. And foremost among them is the way that this Leeds side played, right?
Yes. I mean, look, obviously people are pointing at the moment, if you're a Southampton fan, I was listening to a Twitter Spaces the other day with, 500-600 people talking about the end of Jones and the start of Marsch, and all the fans are saying the same thing. It's like, what he did save Leeds. He may be flawed, but he did save Leeds, which he did. But he had Rafinha. And the players kind of just, I'm not saying they ignored him, but there were definitely still the echoes of Bielsa in that play. Yeah. And what he actually did was shoehorn a few players into some slightly iffy positions, I thought. And he got over the line, I think, with a final day win, right?
Brentford,
they beat Brentford to stay up, and they did it. And like, he basically fulfilled his job in that short span. And like, forget August, forget June. Don't worry about anything else. If he manages to do this again, then he has achieved his ambitions, right? He has done what he has been brought in to do. But then Leeds step into this next season, this current one here, with Marsch at the helm, and they do a summer of business. Yes, they lose Rafinha, and the football isn't great, and there's a feeling that there's a real flaw to their style, and I can't shake the feeling that his teams have a very, very clear weakness, and that is if you beat his press, you will get a clear-cut chance.
Well, let's look at that, shall we?
And that's kind of how I feel. So we have like team XG, team expected goals conceded in counter-attacks. This is across the entire Premier League for this season, and it's the players who have been on the pitch and their respective teams, and the amount of XG conceded in counter-attacking scenarios. And the top 5 across the entirety of the Premier League are all Leeds players. It's basically the Leeds players who play the most, which gives you a pretty clear picture that Leeds are the most susceptible team in the league to counter-attacking situations. And we have some other statistics as well for them, for attacking and defensive, which we can kind of build on. In attack, this is like relatively middle of the road for most of it, and that's pretty good for a team that or just about avoided relegation, right? Like, you can't really sniff at like the 11th most goals this season. In terms of XG, they are 12th. All right, they're low on passes completed, but they're a Red Bull team, so it is what it is. They're very low on crosses, but they're a very narrow team. Jesse coaches a very narrow tactical system, so that's fine. And shots attempted, 10th as well. So goals, XG, and shots all kind of marry up. They're pretty busy in front of goal. They don't sit there. They don't wait. They go for it, and they take shots. Whether or not those shots are really good or from good locations or the chances are of high quality is a separate scenario. But the Southampton stuff I've been watching recently, absolutely insipid. Barely a shot on target to shout about. So at the very least, this will get the blood pumping at St Mary's.
Yeah, I mean, we can move on to the defensive stats, where it usually tends to fall down. And look, we've already talked about XG and counterattacks. No shocks whatsoever. The Leeds are 20th, and the fact that they're low in the table shows you why they're struggling. And people have just not really had any issues converting chances against Jesse Marsch's Leeds. That's how it's been.
No, I thought these 5 statistics here paint a really nice image of what Leeds are defensively. So I can sit here and I can tell you that they're a high pressing team, and they play a narrow formation, and they try to box you off, win the second balls, and then overload certain areas by having a lot of players in a cluster, usually in the center of the pitch. I can sit there and tell you that. And I can also tell you that if you beat their press, you can get a really good chance one-on-one, no problem. So then we look at the stats to back that up. Non-penalty goals conceded, quite a lot, 35. It's 17th best in the league. It's a poor defensive record. XG conceded in counterattacks. Obviously, they're the worst team in the league. Extremely susceptible to that. Ball recoveries completed in the opponent's half, 4th best. Again, it's that high pressing. So if it works, it works. But when it doesn't, according to the line above, it's absolutely disastrous. And then fouls committed, 281, the most in the league. Now, Jesse Marsch might suggest that little 20, bottom right, should be a 1. He might suggest that that's a good thing, that actually more fouls is more disruption. It's stopping counterattacks. I don't agree with him, but it's illuminative that they're completing the 4th most ball recoveries in the opponent's half, the most fouls in the league, and also, sadly, conceding the most XG from counter-attacking scenarios. It's ride or die, Jack. That's what it is.
Well, I think then the next question becomes, how similar do they look to a Hasenhüttl side, right? Because Hasenhüttl had an era of success at Southampton, or a relative success, I think you would say, considering where they find themselves right now. And you're looking at this and going, okay, that was an RB model. It obviously didn't work at the start of this year, and for the reasons he was sacked. And they've gone, okay, we're going to come away from that, and they've gone straight back to it. Is that sensible, or is that madness?
Well, the cynic in me says that Southampton have spent several £1 million to eventually end up back at Hasenhüttl's like lieutenant. You know, they've sacked Ralph Hasenhüttl when they've departed from the model, only to find themselves 6 months later several million off, and they've got like kind of like a worse version of Ralph Hasenhüttl, and that to me says that they've messed up big time. But we'll take the summer issues out of it. We'll take the new ownership and their decisions out of it. And obviously the big problem here is they lost 3 months with Nathan Jones. Why not just go back to what you think this squad is good at in this situation? You have 16 games left, and most of this squad was compiled for Ralph Hasenhüttl, for a 4-2-2 formation, for a high pressing system. The centre-backs work. Some of the midfielders are perfect for it. Che Adams hasn't looked anywhere decent since, Ralph left. Actually, there's quite a lot here that could be salvaged if you go back to some of the tenets that Ralph Hasenhüttl kind of coached. So I absolutely get it. And One thing I think we will see here is we'll see a pretty solid return to a back four. And this is one thing that really, really annoyed Southampton fans. Nathan Jones' insistence on a back three. This squad has never been able to play a back three. Ralph himself turned to it a few times because of the amount of goals they were shipping, and he never felt comfortable with it, and the players never looked any good at it. It was always a needs-must scenario, and Jones walks in and he tries to put that in place. Everybody else in this squad doesn't fit into that system. So at the very least, they've brought in a manager who I think can put his template down and know that about 16 or 17 of these players are going to feel immediately very comfortable and potentially very familiar with what he wants to do, which in a situation where you've got Chelsea at the weekend and you've got 16 games left, I'd say that's pretty smart.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can come on to it, right? It makes sense to look at. This is Ralph Hasenhüttl's Southampton and it's Jesse Marsch's RB Salzburg, and you can see the immediate similarities.
Yeah, it's that office meme, isn't it? It's the same picture. It's close to the same picture. So obviously I've cherry picked a little bit. I have to be honest. I've got Southampton there from 2019-20. I picked that because I think that was about as good as it got under Hasenhüttl for Southampton. And this represented them at their best. And then we have Jesse's final season at Salzburg before he moved on to Leipzig. You've got a 4-2-2, 4-2-2-2 system in place in both areas. The back four are basically in the exact same positions. The midfield two sit together in a cluster. The two forwards are basically on top of each other. It kind of only looks like 10 players on the Southampton graphic, but I assure you there's a little forward tucked in under right forward. That's Ings and Adams on top of each other because they played in such close proximity. And the left, you've got the similar thing. You've got narrow wingers, you've got a cluster in the middle of the pitch. These are very, very similar systems. So in many, many ways, Southampton here are just sort of harking back to, well, what they gave away, I guess, in the form of Hasenhüttl.
Yeah, I mean, look, the question comes as to, how do Saints line up under Marsch? And we've got a couple of questions here. Randomer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. That was easy to say. Says, how would Paul Onuachu and some other new signings fit into the referred 4-2-2-2? And also, I haven't watched enough of him to know if a man that size can press effectively. It's a really good question.
It is a really good question, and these are the sorts of things that happen when you're essentially in crisis. Onuachu was not signed because he's a perfect fit for the vision moving forward. Onuachu was signed on deadline day because he was the 41st player on the shortlist, and all of the top 40 said no, or were priced out. Like, that's not to disrespect him. Like, he's a good player, but Saints were trolley dashing through that discounted and reduced section on final day. They tried all sorts of different avenues. They tried Vitinha from Braga the day before. That they thought they were going to get that over the line. They were just anybody, please, anybody with a semblance of a goal scoring record. So Onuachu might very quickly become like, oh no, what have I done here? Why have I made this move? Because he looked totally gassed after 60 minutes on Saturday. I think he was like relatively effective in the first half. He put himself about. He jostled with defenders. He didn't win all his aerials, but he did that thing where he puts your defender just off enough. He just nudges them at just the right time so that they couldn't get a clean contact on the ball.
Yeah.
And it just sent the header spiraling left or spiraling right, out for a throw-in or back to James Ward-Prowse. It was just enough pressure, just a jostle. And he was an effective player. And then 60 minutes, and you saw him trying to track and run across, and he was going like that. So whether it's a fitness issue from Belgium to the Premier League or whether or not he will struggle, I don't exactly know. But Che Adams will be fine.
Well, we've already talked about this, haven't we? The fact that how many times did Leeds United try and sign Che Adams under Jesse Marsch? Because he clearly was like, that's a player that can fit my systems. Yeah. And now he gets the opportunity to do so. Look, you've put together a couple of potential lineups, the way that Marsch might look to set up his Saints side. So let's take a quick look at those ones. This is the first one. It is that traditional 4-2-2-2 that the RB school has prioritized. Yeah,
I'll take it away. I mean, look, one thing I realized when I was drawing these up was that Southampton have a lot of players now, like a lot of players, when they're all fit, you've got a question as to whether or not, like Stuart Armstrong, for example, who was brilliant under Hasenhüttl, would even make the bench, because they have so many different options now. But I put Orsic in because I'd like to see him play. I don't know why he's not allowed to play, but new January signing. But this is the 4-2-2-2. You've got a lot of players here who are very familiar with this style. Talking Walker-Peters, Salisu, Ward-Prowse for sure, and Che Adams. In this example, I've put Adams and Onuachu together, but I think Kamaldeen Sulemana could play up front with Adams, no problem. If you wanted to put maybe a Dozy on at right wing, or Armstrong, bring him in sort of right attacking mid if you wanted to. Yeah. And the other notable thing here is I've put Bella Kotchap and Salisu together. And for any Southampton fans watching, I'm not disrespecting Chaleta Sarr there. I know that he's been very, very good this season. However, new system, new manager, new demands. Bella Kotchap and Salisu have the perfect profile for defending very aggressively high up, because their recovery ability is insane. Chaleta Sarr is more of a sweeper. He was very, very good sweeping around the back of a back three. And while he is a very good player, I actually don't think he suits Jesse Marsch as well as the other two. The question mark becomes, do you want to roll with, I don't know their exact ages, but they're about 20 and 22? Like, is that the partnership you want in a relegation dogfight? Or do you want to turn to the guy that's been to a World Cup? It's a separate issue, but that's why I put them there.
Yeah, I mean, we got a question from Izzy Bain or Izabane. I'm not quite sure. What about the Croatians? Orsic and DCC were almost on a jet back home. Do you think they'll come straight into the team? I mean, from what you're saying, Orsic feels like the more likely of them to come in. But whether you can find a pairing that works for Chaleta Sarr is a different question.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple of things here. Orsic I've put in just because I haven't written his name for a month, and I would quite like to do that. So that's why I did it. I don't know where he is. Apparently, fitness-wise, sharpness-wise, he's just not been there. So he's been with the PL2 team. We're all desperate to see him. He was brought in as a goal-scoring wide man. Southampton need all the help they can get there. So we'll see. I don't know what the future holds for him, but I hope that in the coming weeks, he can get up to speed. Chaleta Sarr could still play because, first of all, he might opt for experience and might opt for form. Bella Kotchap has been injured recently. And also, Bella Kotchap could probably play right back. And Salisu can play left back. It's not ideal, but Jesse Marsch plays narrow. He's not going to ask his fullbacks to be hitting the opposition byline and slinging in crosses. He might genuinely ask Salisu or Bella Kotchap to play wide and then just tuck back in when he needs to. So there's options there for him at least.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at the other one. We saw Jesse Marsch move from a 4-2-2-2 to a 4-2-3-1 kind of shape at Leeds. Let's just look at how that one might look here as well. It's a little bit more defensively solid in the middle.
Yeah, so this looks more like what he did with Leeds this season. And it also looks a bit like what Nathan Jones put together against Wolves on Saturday. And it led to Southampton's probably their best half an hour in about 5 months. This would put Ward-Prowse at the 10 position, where he has played quite well recently. In particular, in that one win against Everton, he was very, very good. And if you want a nice active pressing number 10, I think Ward-Prowse would be really good for that. The added benefit to this is that it brings in Alcaraz, Charlie, as the Southampton fans call him, who has been a box of dynamite in midfield. Not perfect by any stretch, but lots of momentum he drives through midfield with, and he really gets the ball rolling. And when he starts driving forward, like it's quite exciting. He's very good in transitional moments. Lavia is a must start because he's the best midfielder they've got in terms of dictating a game. But that would. So I changed the wingers there. Edozie on the left, just because why not? That's definitely possible. Marsch has certainly shown an ability to move beyond his tried and trusted 4-2-2-2 in order to try and get the right players into the right positions.
Yeah, I like this. I'll be honest. I think there's a lot more solidity in that midfield. I would imagine that Adams plays up top as the main man if you're going to play this system, because it allows your front two to really lead from the front in that regard. But generally, I think that might well be what we see, at least at first. If he tries to transition into a 4-2-2-2 later in the season, that would make sense. But I think this is what we might see at first in the Premier League. We've got a couple of questions before we go, and I think there's some good ones in here. And this from HLE: will Southampton's squad fit Marsch better than Leeds' did? Obviously, the Leeds defence wasn't too great, but I thought Leeds looked exciting going forward, just needing someone who could finish chances. I mean, you could argue that the same is true of Southampton in many ways, but there is some solidity there at the back that I think might just mean that the system works a little bit better. I think, Bella Kotchap's excellent. I like Jaleta Sarr. I think Salisu's excellent. If those players can step up and be the one-on-one defenders that we think they can be, then Southampton have a better chance of making this work, I think, than Leeds did, just in terms of defensive nous one-on-one and stopping those counterattacks when they do break through the centre.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a better fit. And it's because they already appointed Ralph Hasenhüttl for about 4 years and built a squad that fit his template. And Marsch and Hasenhüttl sing off the same hymn sheet. They're both, basically, they've been manufactured, pardon the pun, by the same system. And that means that with all the players still left over from the Ralph Hasenhüttl era, and so many of them being key players, should be able to pick this up pretty quickly. There might be a fitness problem. They might need a little bit of time to get back up to that level of fitness to actually play that way. But in terms of actually slotting into the template, I think it works really well. I think Marsch as well, like as a person, I don't know exactly how to word this, but I feel like he's going to be better off at Southampton than Leeds. I don't mean that as like a disrespectful comment towards Leeds fans.
No,
but
I think they're just more a traditional club.
Yeah.
Well, they have slightly more traditional values in terms of what's seen as working. And also, he's not coming in off the bat. It's always better to be the person that follows the legend, right? I know that's a kind of well-worn cliche in many ways, but it was always going to be incredibly difficult for whoever came in after Bielsa. And this is, a traditional one of the old English fan bases with a very kind of set identity who managed to turn that around or at least accept something quite new and exciting when Bielsa came in. And they then became almost like enthralled of it. So whoever was going to follow Bielsa had an incredible task in trying to get them to renew again. And I do wonder how that looks for Leeds. But just generally, I think Southampton might just be a bit more accepting, one, because of the circumstances in which Marsch finds himself coming in that everyone was so pleased to have Nathan Jones gone that any new man looks like a bounce. Whereas at Leeds, there was general just outcry. And I don't mean that negatively. Obviously, what Bielsa did was amazing. But there was general kind of the overwhelming sentiment when Bielsa was sacked was actually one of real sorrow, where it's exactly the opposite at Saints.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Marsch is going to come in and he's going to talk the talk, and he's going to give it he's going to inject personality into his press conferences. He's going to be very animated. He's going to be very passionate. And I think the Southampton fans are really going to latch on to that, because just by virtue of it being very, very different to Nathan Jones sitting there and talking about how he could have been teaching PE in a Welsh mining town, but he's decided to do this instead. And when he was at Luton, there was no one in Europe better than him. Like, they're so tired of all that rubbish that Marsch's sheer positivity alone will transform the feeling among the fan base.
I think Marsch is quite a... Go on.
No, as I said, and if they do, then start the next game and they really, really go at the opposition and really give it some heart, then you never know what might happen. And then, so just to finish off the question, the number one thing that means he's a better fit for Southampton is the fact that this collection of players has been collected for Ralph. The other thing is the centre-back profiles for me, genuinely. Like, I think Leeds have got some decent centre-backs, but they've ended up farming out Diego Llorente to Roma, who just didn't fit the bill whatsoever. I'm unconvinced, really, by like Robin Koch, and Liam Cooper's okay. I don't think any of them are like the true profile of like the rescue 1v1 last man defender that Salisu and Bella Kotchap are. Like, they will get you out of so many problems. They're very like Upper Meccano style last ditch guys. Not as good, obviously. Not good enough to play a World Cup final. But that profile is so important in that position when you want to play that high up and that aggressively.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, a couple more questions. This from Zach. Can Jesse revive some important players like JWP and Salisu performing at top level? If he can, I think Saints have a chance of staying up. I think this is the key point, right? Are you going to put those players in areas where they can make differences? Because that feels like the way to make this all stick.
Yeah, I mean, Ward-Prowse has really woken up post World Cup. He was as bad as the rest of the players, in my opinion, before the World Cup. And usually he's sort of held aloft as like, oh, he can do no wrong. And even this season, you know, there were a number of goals that Southampton conceded in October and November where a player ran off the back of Ward-Prowse into the penalty area and scored. And it was Ward-Prowse's man, and he wasn't looking. So there were some basic errors going on there, and he's cleaned all of that up over the break, and then he's scored like 4 free kick goals, which helps as well. But he's on it. He's massively on it now. Ward-Prowse is back. So that's a great thing to step into. And Salisu actually was really good against Wolves as well for the most part. And these two are very important. Very, very important moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. I want to come back just to this graphic for a second, because we have a question here from Jack who says, thoughts on swapping JWP and Alcaraz around. Alcaraz doesn't offer much defensively. That said, he is, as you said, a box of dynamite. He will press anyone to death.
He will press. My concern would be, actually, to be fair, you could give it a go. My concern when I was putting the graphic together there, in terms of maybe swapping those two, would be that I wouldn't want Alcaraz to be receiving the ball between the lines in higher areas and playing on the half turn. I want him to get the ball off the centre backs and go and run 30, 40 yards and start tussling with people, because that's where his value comes. He progresses the ball by running with it. And it's harder to run with the ball when you're already higher up the pitch because there's just less room, right? But at the end of the day, this team are probably going to be on the back foot a fair bit. And whoever plays at 10 will still have a lot of room to run into. So I can see him playing around with that for sure.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, this from Saint194. As a Saints fan, we need some positivity and to freshen things up to galvanise a young squad. Attacking football is a must now because we need to win games, not just pick up draws to stay up. I think this plays into all of it, right? This plays into the exact points you're making about what Jesse brings to his side and the fact that he won't be afraid to go for it because he knows that, you know, that's the only way out of this. And also, he doesn't know any other way of football.
He doesn't know. Yeah. And it's the comment is spot on. You know, you just got to go for it now. I mean, I keep saying, 16 games left, you know, only 4 points from safety. Like, you know, you've got loads of time left. At the end of the day, they're going to need to win 35, 40% of their games to stay up, probably is the realistic part of it. So not quite 1 and 2.
5 wins minimum.
Yeah. So you've got to go out and try and win games. Jesse will try and do that. And look, I mean, it's not been a perfect 12 months in terms of recruitment, but they've just picked up a player in Kamaldeen Sulemana who is so good and so electric. And what he did on Saturday to Wolves' defence lays down a bit of a marker here. Like, you've got to be leaning on that and looking to that as your prospective saviour rather than let's dig in and try and grind these out. That's not what they're going to do. They need players that can make the difference if they're going to be bold and attacking. And I think steadily they have accumulated them, even if they don't all ever play at the same time.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Right, last one. And we'll go back to randomer 123451, who actually gives a lovely explanation as to why that was the username earlier up in the description. But so how would Marsch fare in the championship if it comes to it? And do you think he would hang around if it comes to that? This is the big question, is that, you know, you mentioned it earlier. Saints can't be thinking about June or August or September. They've got to think about staying in the division. And that's clearly what Marsch has been brought in to do right now. Whether, you know, it is something that could carry on in the championship or not is a question that I think is one that needs to be seen at the end of this season. Because if Saints play well and they do well and they win 5 or 6 games, they draw others, they're a little bit unlucky and just the teams around them pick up points and they end up getting relegated anyway, then I think there's positivity to hang on to. But if this goes down without a trace, I can't see them sticking around with this as a long-term project if it doesn't have immediate results, even if they aren't the results needed to actually save this season.
Yeah, I'd say about, I don't know because I wasn't involved in the process, but like I would imagine that like about 5% of the thought process here in terms of appointing Jesse Marsch is with an eye on next season and a potential project, and then 95% of it is like the here and now, because this is the most important thing. I think there's a chance that Marsch can stick around next season if there's goodwill on both sides, even if they just fall short. I don't think that he would sniff at that challenge, not given the fact that he's been fired from his last 2 jobs within a year because it hasn't gone that well. Now, maybe that says to us that actually this won't last at Southampton and they won't get to that point. But from Marsch's perspective, he needs to be open to that. And from Southampton's perspective, if the personality meshes, if he and the fans get along, if they strike an accord like they did with Hasenhüttl, then okay, consider it. If Saints had gone down under Hasenhüttl, I don't think there would have been that many people calling for his head because they respected the hell out of him and he developed a connection. And that's half the battle. So it's a big TBD for me, and we'll have to see randomer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. But if there's a personality type that can actually do that, I do suspect it might be Jesse's.
Indeed. All right. Well, on that note, we are going to call this a day. And all that's left for me to do is to say thank you to everybody for watching. Thank you for all your questions in the chat as well. We hope we've allayed some concerns or at least answered some of the burning questions that you had about Jesse Marsch's, well, potential, I should still say, appointment as the next Southampton manager, but we could probably stretch to probable at this point. Thank you so much to the Rank God, Mr. Sam Tighe.
Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins. This has been Ranks FC. Make sure you're subscribed down below and also to the podcast. All the links are in the description. We've got loads coming out for you this week across all our platforms. So keep tuned and we will see you all very soon. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.